Hello, everyone. I wanted to take some time today to speak with you guys about the current situation that's happening in the Amazon rainforest. So we live in an era of consumerism. Everything you could ever want, you can have at your leisure. But I wanted to discuss the real price of our convenience and the details surrounding a real existential threat that we face. To provide some more context, I'm going to go over the history of Brazil for just a moment. And we're going to start off with the 70s. In the 1970s, Brazil's economy was in shambles. The president at that time determined that the only way that they would be able to make money is to use the resources from the Amazon rainforest. But the price of that would be to use the land of the indigenous people living in the Amazon. The plan he proposed was to create a trans-Amazonian highway that cut right through the rainforest. And along the highway, they would be using plots of land to harvest soy, raise cattle, and to cut down palm oil trees. Now, keep in mind, since the economy was in such a poor condition, the people living in Brazil were very dependent on this new idea that the president created. And he basically offered them free land and the opportunity to live there as long as they would like to, as long as they harvested the resources in the land. And to someone who may not have anything, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Unfortunately, the manner that they were harvesting this land was extremely unsustainable. What they were doing was burning it down very quickly and stressing the soil that was in that plot of land to the point where it would no longer be able to be used. Regardless of how much you try to treat the land, it can't be fixed. In 2019, they burned thousands of acres of land that were the equivalent to 10 times the size of New York State. And as the expansion of deforestation is gaining more and more momentum, the indigenous people are facing the worst consequences. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, meat consumption has more than doubled in the last few decades. The demand for farm workers has increased exponentially, and so does the need for indigenous land. Farmers and loggers are invading their reservations at night and murdering anyone who attempts to stop them. One of the indigenous people who was a very big advocate was a man named Chico Mendes. He was a speaker for his community, and in the time frame that these protests were happening, he was a very influential figure. He managed to convince other countries to stop doing work with Brazil and managed to give 8% of the land to indigenous people. And in the 10 years following his death, he managed to decrease deforestation rates by 50%. It's just an insane accomplishment from one person, you know? And for a while, things were actually getting better for the people living there, up until the elections of 2018, when history began to repeat itself. The current president, Jair Bolsonaro, is very, very upfront about his beliefs of the rainforest. He has expressed no desire to actually preserve the rainforest or to help the people living there. In fact, in 2019, he tried to pass Proposition 191 in an effort to completely reverse the rights of the indigenous people and remove all of the work done by Chico Mendes. Under his watch, legal logging invasions have been happening on the protected land for the indigenous people as well. Special corporations have taken notice that he is more liberal with using that land, and some of the more familiar names here, Walmart, Costco, McDonald's, use these products with really no care about the impact it has on the rainforest. In the last decade, members of the indigenous tribes have been murdered at disproportionate rates because of this. The biggest targets of this are advocates of the rainforest. And these people are, I mean, they're not doing anything wrong. They're just fighting for their land, you know? Imagine being somewhere for thousands of years with ancestral history and just waking up one day with everything burned. It's pretty traumatizing for them to go through this experience. And even worse, that the presidential figure in power is so adamant about continuing that nightmare for them. Some of the people who have been murdered, one of them was Erizvan. He was an advocate, and at age 15, he was found murdered in a soccer field, stabbed to death. Another advocate was Chief Waipi, who was also murdered outside of his area. And one of the most famous advocates was Paulo Palino, who was found shot to death when an illegal logging invasion was happening in his land. And out of the 300 indigenous people who have been murdered for protesting, only 14 of those cases have gone to trial. So there's a very clear case here that they don't care for the indigenous people. Another sad aspect of this all is that the Amazon rainforest accounts for 10% of the species on Earth. So the more that this rainforest is burning, we'll be able to see the majority of these species, and we've already killed a lot of them. It's estimated that 2.5 million animals have died in these fires, and that's just a rough estimate. It's most likely a lot more. So you may be thinking, how does this affect you? The forest is a very devastating climate crisis we would see all around the world. And once it reaches a point of being burnt, we will no longer be able to fix it. We've currently burned 25% of the Amazon rainforest. Also, a lot of the resources that we use for medicine will no longer be available to us. These are the medicines that we use for cancer treatment, for ibuprofen, for depression and anxiety. Just the smallest things that we may not even pay attention to will no longer even be accessible to us. And a lot of the foods that we consume here in the United States come from the Amazon rainforest as well. So you could say goodbye to avocados, coconuts, coffee beans, chocolates, oranges, and those are just a few of the items that we consume here in America. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Predictions, we have until 2030 to change the way that we have approached climate overall. And for us to realistically meet that goal, we have 1 year to start transitioning our habits. This is our last shot of actually saving the world as we know it. So let's think about what we can do to help. One of the most important things that we can do is to donate to indigenous organizations. Not only does this money go right back to the people, but it also helps provide medical resources, food, clothing, shelter, and alternative forms of energy for them. Because keep in mind, they're deep into the rainforest, so most of the things that we're accustomed to, they have no access to at all. Another thing that we could try to do is eat Brazilian nuts. The indigenous people are actually the main exporters of Brazilian nuts. So all of the money that goes into that goes directly back to them. You could also look for these labels on the items of food that you're buying. It means that the food was made in a sustainable way, and it could actually go a long way if more and more people consumed these items. One last thing that you could try to do is lower your meat consumption to 1 day a week without meat. Did you know that if all Americans skipped meat 1 day a week, it would be the equivalent to taking more than 500,000 cars off of the road? That's a really big impact when we all just choose to work together. And I know that at the end of the day, it's hard not to go with the easy route. When you're a full-time student, parent, or employee, it becomes harder and harder to pay attention to the small details of what we do. Our society is built on convenience at our leisure. But I want everyone in this room to just ask themselves two questions. Why is your convenience more important than their lives? And will you be there to save the world or stand by and watch it burn? Thank you.